Kia ora koutou. Sorry, bit of a false start there. As you heard, my name's Graham Burke. Been in the construction industry about 40 odd years, most of it at the coalface, if you like. Spent about 20 years owning a business that was a scaffold company in Wellington. Sold that a few years ago. I've now got the perfect business that belongs to somebody else. Only thing is, when I put the money in the bank, I found out that interest rates had dropped down to 2%. So like most people in business, spent my life paying 20% interest on all the money I'd borrowed, and now we've got a little bit of cash. It's not worth anything, but still a good place to be. So carrying on with our presentation, what is the construction sector accord? Hopefully we've got a video here that will be a brief introduction.
Construction touches us all in some way, and its success is crucial for a better Aotearoa. The Accord was launched in April 2019 to try and address the many issues affecting the sector.
The Construction Sector Accord is the first step in creating a strong partnership between government and industry.
And the partnership is to create a high-performing construction sector for a better New Zealand. The Accord has big goals: increase productivity, raise capability, improve resilience, restore confidence, pride, and reputation. The Accord's work is about driving long-term culture change, from increasing diversity in construction to reducing carbon emissions. We want to see better business performance, better leadership, better health and safety culture, including mental health, fairer risk allocations. We want to see a safer, more successful, more sustainable construction sector. By working together, we can achieve that vision.
Okay, so gives you a brief idea of where we're coming from, but basically the Construction Accord is a partnership between industry and government. So we're not a spokesperson for government and we're not a spokesperson for industry. We're not a peak body. We are industry trying to work with government to make those first steps towards transforming the industry. Those are our big goals: increase productivity, raise capability, improve resilience, and restore some confidence, pride, and reputation in the sector. Pretty small group. You know, the developing people work stream in the Accord is arguably the one that's got the most to do. And up on the screen there, you're looking at the team. So there's myself, Bill Newson, who's National Secretary for Air2, started his working life as a boilermaker. So he spent several years actually working in the industry. And Catherine Hall, who's a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal person. She's got broad experience across recruitment and construction and also in industry training. But we're the team. So we're not set up to actually be doing our own research or launching schemes or whatever. Our job is to try and influence people across the system to make that transformation that we're trying to achieve. The Construction Accord, you know, the guts of the Construction Accord, it started in 2000 out of a germ of an idea in 2019, but it was born out of major construction companies falling over at a time when we had peak workload. The coalition government came in and they had these ambitious plans to build, you know, another 10,000 houses a year. We couldn't build any. The industry was already at maximum capacity. And what we were building, we were suffering with the leaky house syndrome. So, you know, we know that, roughly speaking, the cost of repairing leaky buildings around the country has been bigger than the cost of repairing buildings out of the Christchurch earthquake. So the industry, from an outsider's perspective, was a dog. But it's not, you know, it's got some major issues. It's suffered for decades from the boom bust cycles that hit the whole economy, but they really hit the construction industry because we're at the mercy of consumer demand. So for the first time ever, we actually had government, we had main contractors, we had subcontractors, SMEs. Everybody was in agreement that we had to do something to change. And if we really want to transform a sector, the only way you'll do it is by getting everybody on board. Government can't do it without industry. Industry can't do it without government. Main contractors can't do it without the supply chain, and the supply chain can't do it without without having the main contractors on board. So that's how we started. I'm co-lead of the developing people work stream. To my mind, people are at the core of everything. It's certainly not the whole picture. We've got other work streams working on procurement, better contracts, consenting, all sorts of things, but people are at the centre of it. So as I say, we're not actually out there doing the work ourselves, but what we're doing is trying to support other projects that are working towards that transformation. So one of the biggest things, and you'd all be aware of it, even though you're not in the vocational education sector, but the review of vocational education has been one of the major changes to industry, well, the major change to construction industry training in our lifetime. So we're still in the early stages of it, although we'd like to think we're fairly well down the track. But Bill and I have both been really heavily involved in the establishment of the Construction Infrastructure Workforce Development Council, Wahanga Ro. Bill's on the, we were both on the establishment boards, and Bill is on the actual board. Centre of Vocational Excellence, Tuhara ConCOVE, that's been operating for about a year. A little bit slow getting established, obviously, with the ravages of COVID-19 preventing us getting out and about, but we're starting to make some good progress and some good findings there. Again, you know, that's an opportunity of a lifetime with a 5-year funded program looking at vocational education. It's never been done before. We've got a project we're running, we're assisting with some pilots for the infrastructure skills centres. Now, this came out of a ministerial delegation to Victoria in 2019, led by Shane Jones, where they went over and looked at large purpose-built infrastructure training centres, and that over there, that's a collaboration between the government, industry, and the unions. Now, we haven't been able to mirror that here just because of the size of the sector, but what we have been able to do is we've got some pilots running where we've got 6-week programs of really intensive training for people coming into the industry. Now, that's been led by Fulton Hogan. It's been funded by Ministry of Social Development, and it's been supported by civil contractors, and the Accord's kind of been the glue that's managed to get it going in the start, but we're pushing out to actually upscale it. Interestingly, the thing that we're learning from this is that the biggest impediment to this training, actually one of the key differences in these schemes is that all the trainees are actually employed by someone from day one. So they're on that course for 6 weeks, they're employed every day they're on the course, and they finish on a Friday, and on the Monday they're out on site with their host company. So it's that we're not looking at a 20% success rate or anything like that, it's 100% success rate. To date, as far as I know, there's only been one trainee that's fallen out of employment. But what we're finding is that the real impediment here is actually the funding system. So we couldn't get this funded adequately through TEC. So Ministry of Social Development have come in and funded it. But that's meant that to get onto the scheme as a funded trainee, you actually have to be a client of MSD. So that's meant that we've had trouble getting the numbers on the course to make it viable. So, you know, we're finding that actually it's not the training system that's the problem, it's the funding system. And the Accord's in a situation where we can influence to try and do something about that. One of the tasks that we were given was to work on a long-term workforce plan. Now, this came, you know, soon after the Accord was set up. Of course, we had the first lockdown in 2020. And I'm sitting at home one evening watching the news, and the Minister of Building and Housing, Jenny Salisa, was on TV. She was asked a question, these shovel-ready projects, Minister, have we got the skills we need to actually complete these tasks? And she says, oh yes, well, we've got the Construction Accord working on that. Bugger me, I'm sitting in my lounge at home. I am the Construction Accord Developing Workforce program. It's a huge task, you know. At that point, we didn't even have a decent pipeline, let alone some means of matching the pipeline to what the skills requirements are going to be. But fortunately, we found projects out there already in the market that were working on that. So BCITO at the time had a project down in the south of the South Island, the lower half of the South Island. looking for the, working for the councils, looking at what are the workforce requirements going to be coming out of Dunedin Hospital, university builds, stuff that was happening up in Queenstown. So they were actually able, using some funding that came out of the COVID response, to develop that work that they'd done down there and spread it out right across the country. So they've now got, it's not very granular, but they've got overarching workforce forecasts right across those 15 areas covered by the regional skills leadership groups. And we also know that ConCOVE are working on a much more kind of granular and intimate long-term workforce plan. During that time, we also found that actually there's a lot of people working on research in the construction workforce area. So between ConCOVE and the Accord, we've actually managed to pull a forum together. And there's something like a dozen different projects, or some of them are just people doing, well, I shouldn't say just, some of them are people doing PhD studies. Others are broader projects like ConCOVE. But we've actually got that forum together, and it's a really good way of getting collaboration between projects and trying to cut down some of the duplication. Of course, when you talk about workforce, you can't get away from wellbeing and health and safety. And although this is covered under a different stream of the Accord, we work in really closely. So both Bill Newson and me are long-term board members of Construction Health and Safety New Zealand, and Bill's also on the board of Mates in Construction. Of course, if we actually manage to get the transformation that we're looking at in construction, there'll always be a place for organisations like Mates in Construction. But if we can fix some of those fundamental issues in the construction system, then we can reduce a lot of that stress and anxiety that actually leads to those mental health issues. We've got two big kind of projects that we're working on at the moment at the Accord. First one is the diversity roadmap, which is being delivered for us by Diversity Works. So that project's about 2/3 of the way through. The major research has actually been completed, and they've developed a gap analysis of work that's currently going on in the sector around diversity, inclusion, and equity. And they're running a series of workshops at the moment to develop a roadmap that we can use to actually meaningfully do something about diversity. So it's got a lot of aspects to it. Some of it is just around capacity. So we've got a very small percentage of the workforce that they cross construction that are women, for starters, somewhere down around 10%, although women make up 50% of the population. So there's a huge resource there that's open to us. But I think to some extent, the capacity issue is overridden by the equity and the inclusion issues. And when we're looking at diversity, we're not just looking at gender or ethnicity, we're also looking at neurodiversity. We're looking at age. You know, we've got an aging population in New Zealand. If all of our workforce retires as soon as we hit 65, we're going to be stuck, because in actual fact, given the birth rates in the early 2000s, we're not going to have enough people coming into the workforce to actually replace those that are leaving. So, you know, can we retain people in the workforce? Most of us in senior positions within the sector are people pretty much my age. You could say we're on the way out, but the way that we engage with young people now has to be different to the way that people engage with us when we were young. That authoritarian style that we were brought up with, let's face it, we bloody hated it anyway, but we had no choice. You know, that's just how it was, and we fitted in with it. Interesting how we hated it, but we've continued on in the same vein. But if we want to keep young people, if we want to attract young people into our industry, we want to keep them there, we've got to do it differently. The other real interesting thing that's come out of that study is they see that biculturalism has really it's been totally overlooked in our sector, despite the fact that we've actually got a big proportion of our workforce at Marion Pacifica, but we've overlooked that. And it's interesting, some of the work that we've done over the development of Rove, where we've looked at embracing maturity in the training system. you know, a lot of biculturalism and embracing maturity is actually around how we engage with people and engaging in a meaningful way. And interestingly, that's what younger people want as well. They don't want to come to work and be told this is what you're doing today. They want to know why. They want to know what the vision is of their company in business and how they fit into that. So, you know, this diversity project is a really, really important bit of work. And we're looking at actually a roadmap that we're going to get some outcomes out of that over the next couple of years, and then measure it properly again over the year after that before we go to that next step. Tying into that is a project that's really dear to my heart, the construction skills strategy. And we're in the early stages of this now. We're running some workshops around the country. This is grown out of the Construction Skills Action Plan, which was developed by the coalition government shortly after they came into power. And, you know, they were looking at why don't we have the capacity in the industry? So they pulled together a bunch of initiatives. We've managed to get a lot of new people into the industry, especially a lot of them coming out of the Auckland area. We've had skills hubs and things like that. They changed some immigration settings, and we've actually managed to bring a good number of people into the industry from overseas. And we've boosted the number of apprentices. So in actual fact, we've got a higher proportion of apprentices at the moment than I think we've ever had, certainly in my living memory. To be fair, a lot of that is on the back of the apprenticeship boost. But, you know, it's great. We're upskilling more people than we ever have before. So there was a bunch of initiatives that came to an end towards the end of last year. By all the measures that we used to measure that, really successful. And it's great. You know, I'm never going to argue that it's really fantastic that we've got 9,000 young people into jobs in construction. But has it actually made a difference to the skill shortage across the construction sector? And arguably it hasn't. Now, that's not saying that we haven't done some good work, but we have to do more than just bring people into the sector. We've got an aging population. We've got increasing demand. The aging population syndrome isn't a New Zealand issue. It's an international issue. So to date, we've been shopping overseas for our labour. But the same, you know, we're competing against the UK, we're competing against the States, against Europe, Australia. So in the international market, we've got the same issue. We can't just go overseas and shop for the skills that we're short of. So we have to do something different. Doing what we're doing at the moment, we're never going to get on top of this problem because demand is outstripping supply. So I can't tell you what the answer is at the moment, but what we're looking at is a strategy that goes across all of the government agencies and industry through to 2035, that when we start looking at an initiative, whether it be part of the ROVE, Review of Vocational Education, whether it be a university program, an Ministry of Education program, immigration, Ministry of Social Development, how does that initiative fit into our strategy so that we're all working together for that common goal? Just looking a bit at the sector and some of the issues that are kind of in front of us. This is a small part of the issues, but actually it's one part of the puzzle, but it's a pretty big chunk. 95% of the firms in construction have got less than 10%, 10 staff. 91% have got 5 or less. In actual fact, the average size of a business in the construction sector is 5 people. So if you've got a business that's 5 people, and I tend to always think about trades because that's my background, but it could be a design practice or a quantity surveying practice or anything else. At 5 people, the owner of that business is going to be actually working in the business. So they're going to have to be working on the tools or doing some kind of chargeable work for at least 3 days a week. They're also going to be managing the HR side. They're going to be managing the culture side. They're going to be spending at least a day a week going out trying to get enough work so that they can keep the business going. Is that a sustainable business? At the end of that business's life, the only thing for it to do is to shut down. So there's no any institutional knowledge or intellectual property is gone. it's just finished. The only way the owner of that business can actually get a return on their capital is to take the profit out and invest it in something else, which is generally residential real estate, which is another problem that New Zealand has. So just imagine what the construction sector would look like if the average size of the business was, say, 15 or 20 people. So that we've actually got some dedicated management and we've got people actually out there all the time making sure that we've got future work coming in. We've got people that are actually, they might not be full-time trainers, but we've got people in that business that are trained as trainers. So we're upskilling our workforce. We've got people that can look after the mental health and well-being of our business, but the business is still a functional business that's productive. Have a think about that business and what that would do to the career opportunities for people coming into it. So if I'm an apprentice and I come into a business and there's 5 people in it, he's the boss and he's been there for 30 years. There might be his son or his brother or his mate. I'm never going to get one of their jobs. And there are a couple of other guys. Where's my career advancement? Basically, it comes from when I finish my apprenticeship, I leave and I go and work for myself and start up another little business and I compete with my boss for the same amount of work. If we're going into businesses that are all 15 or 20 people, then I've got a career opportunity within that business. There's no need for me to move on. And the owner of that business has got a business that he can now sell at the end of the life of that business, or maybe even sell to some of the staff as the business progresses. So that means that he can now start investing some of that profit back into the business, upskilling our people, investing in innovation and plant and machinery. That makes the business more successful again. So the other side of that equation, there are 65% of the industry are currently sole practitioners. Are people actually out there working on their own by choice, or are they working because that's the way the industry operates? We work on a contract model to reduce risk. So if we can lift the size of that average size of business, a lot of those people might actually come back and work within a bigger organisation. That improves well-being, and it improves the opportunities for advancement, and it builds a skill level in those businesses. So those are kind of my views rather than the Accords, but that's the type of thinking we have to have if we're really going to make a change. And that's the kind of challenge I'd throw out to you with your research projects and initiatives, is if we really want to change the industry, we actually have to change the makeup of the industry. There's no good saying we need to attract more people into it, because we just know that we can't attract enough people into it to meet the demand of the future. We actually have to upskill and lift that capability and capacity at the same time. So the Accord is finishing in the next few months, about the middle of this year. We have an assurance from government that we are going to have a version 2. It will change a little bit. We're on the face of it, we're going to concentrate on 4 main areas. So they're talking about people, planet, progress, and procurement. People and procurement, I mean, those are the 2 things that drive it. Procurement drives the industry. I think what we've really made a big change in is that the government, especially as a client, recognises that value is more than just the cheap upfront price. The change to the carbon emissions are going to require us to carbon budget, and so that's going to force clients to actually look at more of the whole of life, not just when we're looking at carbon, we're looking at the whole system. So to some extent that will help to make that change. So people and procurement are absolutely vital. By progress, we're talking about innovation. And I've just been talking about, we cannot just bring more people into the industry to get what we need. We have to innovate, we have to lift productivity. And planet, of course, is the environment. So brands, and I think brands are in the room, but brands have already worked on a roadmap for what construction can do to improve our environmental impact, and that's a really important part. We're still looking at about 30% of what we do at the Accord being dedicated to real critical issues that come up, and I make no apologies for the fact that the Accord pivoted over to a COVID response in 2020, because if we hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have been back at work we'd be really struggling now. So that's an important part of the Accord. But we're going to be moving forward, and we want to really see that transformation continue. That's it for me. Happy to take any questions.